Now, 1 in 4 of the world's school children aged live in countries affected by humanitarian emergencies such as conflict and natural disasters. That's according to a new report by UNICEF, and new figures reveal that 75 million children in humanitarian crisis worldwide are in desperate need of educational support. Well, with me now is Tom Hiddleston, the British actor and UNICEF ambassador who travelled to South Sudan last year to meet families that have lost children to kidnappings. Welcome here to today's Global. I mean, this is the first time you've spoken publicly about that trip that you made, but you told our team that this is a war in that country that's a forgotten one, which strikes children with unforgivable brutality. Tell me what you saw and what you heard.
Well, Matthew, first of all, thank you for having me on the programme. It was an extraordinary time I spent in South Sudan. In our world, there are so many conflicts and crises that are reported on every day, and South Sudan, I feel, is one that is less, doesn't get as much coverage, I think, for whatever reason. And it's the youngest country in the world. It declared independence from Sudan in 2011. And since December 2013, the country's been riven by a civil war. The major cities have become conflict zones. Civilians and inhabitants have been driven into the countryside, where, of course, there is so much need. There is less food available, there is less water, there's no vaccinations for children.
For a trip like this,
yeah,
for anyone making it, you'll have done your homework. Were you prepared in terms of what you saw, or were you shocked?
You do as much preparation as you can in terms of preparing yourself for what you're going to see, but nothing certainly prepared me for the levels of desperation and uncertainty. That there are millions of people and children in that country who've been cast aside by the civil war.
And I suppose because they're not in schools, as many of them are not, it makes them incredibly vulnerable, doesn't it?
Well, I think the thing is that in a conflict like South Sudan, the safest place for children to be is in school. And what I'm most excited about is that in 2 or 3 weeks' time, at the World Humanitarian Summit, the first of its kind on the 23rd of May in Istanbul, the summit has been convened to discuss this very point, that in a conflict or a natural disaster, education can be life-saving. It is as life-saving as water and vaccinations and access to health-providing services. Because if you look at Syria, for example, the Syrian conflict has been going on for 4.5, 5 years. In the last 5 years, that means those children haven't been in school. And if they're educated, they might be able to get a job. And if they get a job and they develop a level of confidence, they can then rebuild their own society.
And that's what they have to rebuild. Just if you look at the pictures there that we're running, that is the scene in so much of Syria. But just returning to South Sudan and what you saw with your own eyes and the conversations that you had, am I right in saying that just shortly before you arrived, in one particular village that you saw, many children were abducted? Because that is another problem, isn't it? That so many of the children are actually abducted and become child soldiers, in effect.
Which is a war crime. Not to put too fine a point on it. And I had access to a village in the north of South Sudan called Wau Shuluk, which is not far from Malakal in the north of the country. And it's only accessible by boat along the Nile. And I was able to go up there. That route is now closed. And we were visiting a health centre for malnourished children, which is run by UNICEF. But the trip coincided with just 5 days before I arrived. A number of 89 schoolboys were sitting their exams, and they were abducted in the middle of their examinations and pulled away to serve in armed groups as child soldiers, some as young as 13. And that's a huge problem.
Everything about that is terrifying. I know that UNICEF, apart from the work that you were describing a moment or two ago, it actually does work to try to get some of those children back.
It does.
Because you spoke to families who'd lost children.
I did. Yes, and what's fantastic about the work that UNICEF do is only a day or two later, I was in another part of the country called Pibor, where they have reunification schemes. I saw a ceremony where hundreds of boys have been pulled back from the military, and I saw one boy reunited with his mother for the first time in 2 years. He was 16, and it's very moving to see that at first hand. But no child as young as that, 13, 14, 15, should be given a gun and made to fight in a civil war that really they are not responsible for.
Now, the appeal that you were talking about is only a fortnight away before it's launched. I mean, the plan is to raise $4 billion to actually spend it in all these areas that you are talking about. I mean, how realistic is that? Because in the past, there are global appeals and figures are put on it, and so often the money fails to come.
Well, I think it's possible. Because I think what we need to do is persuade. I think actually as a nation, the UK can help galvanise attention from the rest of the world, persuade people that education can be life-saving. I think immediately people imagine that you need to get water in, that you need to get those other more perhaps obvious life-saving services. But with so many humanitarian crises lasting so many years now, the idea that a generation of children could be lost because they're not at school, when actually a school is the safest place for them to be.
Now, what's it like for you personally? I mean, you as an actor have exploded onto the screens over the last few years. I mean, is this one of the upsides of fame, that you can use that to shine lights on places, on issues around the world that perhaps we wouldn't end up talking about?
I think so. I've been so lucky to work with UNICEF for a number of years now. I went on another field trip to West Africa, to Guinea, in 2013, and I see the work that they do, and I think anyone in my position would be compelled to act. And my good fortune is that I have a platform, and occasionally people want to hear what I have to say. And I'm very, very happy to use that platform to stand up for the world's most disadvantaged children.
It's been such an extraordinary transition for you. I mean, only a few years ago you were a jobbing actor, now Thor, The Avengers, The Night Manager, awards. I want to show you one picture before you actually go that let's call up. Look at this picture behind me. Now, which one of these two, you or Idris Elba, would make the best Bond?
Who do you think, Matthew? I don't know. The truth is, the position is not vacant.
Get out.
I believe it's not. I believe Daniel Craig is still filling those very big boots.
I don't think so. I mean, you must. There must be moments where you stand in front of that bathroom mirror and at least practice saying it, because you never know when that call could come. I don't know
about that. Do you do that? Do you stand in front
I'm not in the frame. You are.
You might be. You might be. Listen, Idris is an old friend, and actually, this is last weekend, and we were in New York City. Actually, I'd just been to the White House Correspondents' Dinner to watch President Obama give his final address, which is very entertaining.
And just finally, because we're almost out of time, I mean, just on the Bond thing, I mean, how does it work? Do you lobby for something like that, or do you simply wait and maybe you get the call, maybe you don't?
I don't think it's like the US election. I don't think you have to campaign. If I had something concrete to tell you, I would tell you. I actually am as in the dark as you are. So
you're smiling, so that's a sign. So anyway, we'll run with it anyway.
Okay.
Tom Hiddleston, thank you so much for coming in, talking about your work as UNICEF ambassador and all the rest of it. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Now, before we break, let me just return to